it?
So many very kind people. Yes.
Amazing, David. I'm so happy for you. So you take care of yourself, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Good, David. Happy to see you. So everybody, here we are. I'll put it on my gallery so I can see you all. So let's start with our little prayer.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
Go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah. So again, Nina's going to make an offering on behalf of everybody from Laksam and everybody, and requesting the teachings as if the Buddha were here right now, requesting the teachings from the Buddha. It's a very auspicious meaning. And if you don't know the mandala, what it means, just visualize all the marvelous things of this world. Use your creative imagination. Pile them all up and imagine offering it all to the Buddha. Every thought counts, so don't discount it. Don't. It's marvelous. It's got great meaning. Okay.
Great. So let's start with the short mandala offering. Saji ki Jushin metok tramri rablingji nidegyen padi sangye jindu mikte ulwa yidrokunamdak jingla parshog. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami. Venerable, would you like us to continue with the refuge, or would you take, Venerable, you're
No, I will lead it. I will do it, but I just need to. Would you mind, Talia, turning off the prayer for a moment? Just turning it off for a second. Turning it off. Take it away from the screen. Yeah, that's it. I've got to do something, and I can't do it with it there. Okay. Good. Now we're ready to go. I guess I'm ready to go. Okay. Let's now, for this final teaching in this series on the Lam Rim, let's do the final one, which is the final stages of the Bodhisattva path, and that's learn and know the fifth and sixth perfections of the Bodhisattva, the completion of the path, the culmination of the entire path, the development of this marvelous state of mind called single-pointed concentration in order to use this laser-like focused mind to gain the sixth one, which is the final stages of the entire path, which is the insight into the ultimate reality of how things exist, thus cutting the root of all nonsense and then combining it with the Bodhisattva path, because we're in the Bodhisattva path, and that's then Buddhahood. Culmination of all this is Buddhahood. So let's, to listen to these teachings, to together listen, think, analyze these teachings so that we can develop our amazing potential, this potential, so we can really be of benefit to sentient beings. Thinking this is why we're sitting here together. Sanghe chadan soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sanghe drupa shog sanghe chadan soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sanghe drupa shog. And we say in English, and I'll add some words. So what we're saying is that until we are enlightened, we will rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and our community, spiritual community. And by the virtuous karma that we create by listening to these teachings, by all these karmic seeds we drop into our bank vault, by listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha to be of benefit to all suffering sentient beings. Okay. So here we are. So let's just summarize what we've done, and leading to where we're going now. So we start with this path. This, as we know, as we've heard, Lam Rim, gradual path gradual, a course basically that culminates, you graduate from, at the end of which you graduate as a Buddha. Essentially it's that. So like I always repeat, and it's so important to know, often we just don't realize this, but all the information here is taken first by a teacher and encapsulated in this little text called Light That Guides You on Your Way, back in the 11th century or something in Tibet, this Indian scholar and yogi who came to Tibet. And this little text is the basis for Tsongkhapa's literature, the Lam Rim literature, the gradual path literature. And what our teacher then, Tsongkhapa, of course, takes is all these points from the vast body of knowledge of all these amazing, the centuries. What they do is they take the main points in an orderly way, orderly according to the level of difficulty, and second, according obviously to the capacity to internalize it. Because this is not just a philosophical study. You don't just learn music and then leave it in your head. You don't just learn cooking and leave the recipes in your head. You've got to put it into practice. I mean, this is really evident. But sometimes we forget that when it comes to things like philosophy and psychology, because we're all very intelligent and we all get very excited about all these different interesting ideas, But the entire point is to put it into practice. If you don't, then you're missing the point. It's just ridiculous, Better than nothing, but nothing changes inside. That's the point. So, so the very first point we discussed, taken, especially the Lama Tsongkhapa, for example, when he started teaching foreigners, Western people from the West, modern people whose philosophy mainly was, besides being Catholics or Jews, maybe Christians or Jews, maybe, or some Muslims, but at the time in the 60s and 70s, all these Western hippies probably weren't many Muslims or Hindus, mostly either Christians or Jews, or indeed the prevailing view, which is still the prevailing view on the planet, really, is the one that's most serious, not on the planet, but in certain parts, is the philosophical materialism. So when brought up in that view, then the first thing we have to think about is, what is this mind then? What is mind? We need to know that, because that's what gets enlightened. If it was the brain, if the mind is the brain, if we can prove that Buddha's wrong in suggesting the mind isn't physical, if we can prove him wrong, then the whole of Buddhism just collapses into a heap of utter and complete absurdity. That's a fact. So the point is here, Buddha's view is that he has found this from his own direct experience, because he's not a creator. It's not from revelation, from his own experience. This is crucial to understand, that the mind is consciousness. These words are used synonymously, virtually, used in different contexts, but broadly are synonymous. That each of those words is referring to the non-physical part of us, not a spirit or a soul like the Christians and the Muslims and other religious people use. Buddha posits nothing like that. He does posit something not physical, but he calls it the mind. So that includes thoughts, feelings, emotions, neuroses, your psycho, your crazy, deluded states of mind, your wholly marvelous states of mind. It includes the more subtle levels of our mind. It goes to, in fact, Buddha would assert subtler levels of our mind that we do not posit as existing in modern neuroscience and psychology. So the mind is what Buddha has found, has this marvelous potential to become a Buddha. Bud implying the eradication of delusions from the mind, and Da implying the development to perfection of all the other part of the mind, which is all the virtues, the goodness, the wisdom, the clarity, the joy. These are innate within us. These are the nature of our mind. So this is the end result, Buddha. And that work happens in the mind. So from day one, we better know what the mind is, isn't it? If the mind is what can turn into the Buddha's mind, and that's the job of, that's what we culminate as, that's what we graduate as a Buddha. So the first thing to know about is, what is this mind? We learn the basic things. Lama Zopa would teach that it's not physical, and the crucial point is, it's not the handiwork of a creator, which is a typical view. If you're a Christian or a Muslim or even a Hindu, you come from this source called, this absolute source. No view like that in Buddhism. It's quite a radically different view. You've got to hear it clearly. We tend to think we come from some outer external source, or if we're materialists, we come from our mummy and daddy. It's the same philosophy, something out there. That's the weirdest idea for the Buddha, I promise. But we've got to get used to this. It's quite shocking. So where does my mind come from? Well, I'm sorry to be so boring, but it's so simple, it's embarrassing. From the previous moment of your mind. It's a beginningless continuity of mental moments. It's like a chain of mental moments. This moment coming naturally leads back to the previous link in the chain. And that moment of consciousness has its source in the previous moment. And that moment of consciousness has its source in the previous moment. And you can go back to a beginningless time and you will never find a first moment, which we frantically want and are shocked to hear that there can't be such a thing. This is a really interesting point, I tell you. I mean, it's the nuttiest thing we've ever heard. But of course, there has to be a beginning, we say. There's a deep belief in our minds that that's coming from the view of no cause and effect and grasping at things as inherent and permanent. Nonsense, Buddha says. So mind is beginningless, and indeed, from the Mahayana point of view, it's endless. But the delusions in it are not. They are beginningless, but they're absolutely not endless. You can get rid of them, honey, and this is the whole point under all the Buddhist practice. Everything leads to that achievement of Buddhahood on the Mahayana path. And the job where that job happens, in the mind. The bit of us that does the job, the mind. That's it, you know. So this marvelous potential. Then the next step, Tsongkhapa in the 14th century tells us we need to find a decent spiritual teacher. We might use the word mentor in the West. It's a really nice word. Look up, you know, it's modern language. We don't use the guru in modern language, or even spiritual teacher. Or the Christian one, they call it a confessor. I mean, it's the meaning, or a psychiatrist or a psychologist these days. But a nice word is mentor. And I think the definition is very nice: an experienced and trusted advisor. An experienced and trusted advisor. Wow, we need one of them. Well, that's what they mean by guru. Experienced in what? Becoming a Buddha. And trusted comes from our side. We have to trust them. So that's really a marvelous modern term for a guru, you know. So their expertise is not cooking or, you know, sport. Their expertise is how to become a Buddha. So obviously the best one is a person who's become a Buddha already, you know. So anyway, that's necessary to find one of them. As Lama Yeshe says, you know, Buddha's dead. So the Four Noble Truths will only have any meaning for us when we hear them out of the mouth of a person in front of us who speaks like us, who sounds like us, who looks like us. That's a human being. Buddha embodied in a human being. That's the mentor. That's the spiritual mentor, the guru. Heavy with qualities, it means. It's sort of logical. Think of anything you've ever learned in your life that really has been meaningful to you. You learned it from a mentor. You learned it from a person who knew how to do it. It's very reasonable. It's very logical. It's our own experience. But unfortunately, not unfortunately, but because all these texts in Tibetan are written in 14th century language, coming back from India 2,500 years ago language, and the irony of Tibet is it was kept beautifully intact up on the other side of the Himalayas. So it didn't degenerate over these thousands of years. It's probably degenerated more in the last 60 years since it's been in the West than it has in the last 1,000 before it. We're at the tail end of this delicious, rich, kept intact, amazing body of knowledge that can track itself back perfectly to the great Nalanda tradition in India, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century, you know. When it finished in India, it had already becoming flourishing in Tibet. We are part of the Nalanda tradition, as His Holiness always tells us. So this next one is we need to find a teacher. And then the next one is our teacher gets us these are kind of preliminary contemplations to prime our mind to even want to enter into the path. So the next one is now a teacher gets us to think about just a market research basically, and check up on, just look at the world and compare ourselves, even just with the human world, forget the other world, all the other animals and all the creatures. But even in terms of the human world, if we ticked all the boxes and did our market research, we'd find that we're one of the 0.0001% of fortunate people, not rich, fortunate, with ethics, reasonable intelligence, reasonable conditions, and at least a mattress to sleep on, and some money in the bank to get food, and the miracle of leisure to use that in order to enter into the path and become a Buddha. Perfect human rebirth. So the action point from this is don't waste it. The action point from the contemplation of the perfect human rebirth is don't waste it. It's this precious resource we've got. It's a really good term. This human life, this combination of human body and mind and the life we've got, the conditions, is this unbelievably precious resource. So as soon as you say that, it really shifts the energy. We say it's how fortunate. We sit there resting on our laurels. Oh, aren't I fortunate? What good is that? It's like opening up, your cupboard every day and you see you've got a big box of these strange pieces of oblong paper, or even if you know what they mean, this is the first point, we don't even know what they mean in the beginning. There's pieces, like I've always mentioned this example, you Swiss have nice ones, usually, but the only money I've seen, maybe the Israelis as well, that design their money vertically, not horizontally, not portrait style. So you've got these things, piece of plastic, very nicely designed with pretty pictures on them and little numbers in the corner. And you don't know what they mean. This is the first one. You don't know what they mean. And you've got a big box of them with 1,000 on the corner of every one. And you don't know what they mean. It's a really marvelous example. It's a simple example of emptiness too. So what you've got is a bunch of pieces of oblong plastic with pretty pictures on it and numbers in the corner. And you don't know the meaning. A person who understands money would think you're completely out of your brain insane. You're sitting on this incredible treasure. You're sitting on top of this resource. Hear the word resource. This is the point. Intrinsically, it's nothing. You can't even wipe your bottom with it. It's too small. Think about this. But when we all agree, and this is what emptiness is, we all agree on its value. We all agree it's a resource. That if you hand that $1,000 note to someone, you can get €1,000, 1,000 euros, or 1,000 Swiss francs worth of something. That's a resource. So if we think of ourselves as this big lump of me, you know, plodding through life, that got born, somebody else decided it, and that will die, and someone else decides that, and I'm just an unlucky person looking around, hoping bad things don't happen. No, it is not like that. The Buddha says, you know, we've created this life. And when we understand its actual meaning, like the meaning of money, we'll know that having these conditions, having this life and this mind, this combination, is an unbelievable, precious resource. Of course, it takes time to hear these words. It sounds so weird, you know. So a resource is something you do something with. That's the point about the word resource. Just say, oh, aren't I lucky? I'm a human. That's not enough. But I'm a resource. Oh, so how shall I use myself? That's a resource. You use it. Well, honey, you use it to stop suffering, get out of samsara. You use it to stop suffering, junior school, entry level, stop harming others, don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, live in vows and purify every day. So you can guarantee, if you like, using the money analogy, that you get 1,000 euros worth for your money. When you die, you get another decent human rebirth. But you can do more than that. You can go to high school, middle scope, and you can use it to get rid of all the delusions, and you can get out of, you can quit the delusions, quit the second kind of suffering, and you're kind of like you're getting 10 million times benefit from your 1,000 euros worth. And then you can even go to the university level, to the great scope, and get bodhicitta, and then realize emptiness, and then become a Buddha. Well, it's like getting 10 trillion times value for your 1,000 euros, Swiss francs. Just try to get my analogies, try and hear the meaning. And it's kind of cute and crass, but they've got logic, you know. So don't waste this precious life, people, whether we're at the beginning of it or the end of it. And we don't know when the end of it is. We know that. We don't know when we're going to die. Even when you're told you're going to die. Okay, this is the next step. So I won't go there. I'll leap in. So now, conclusion from this point, I must not waste this precious life. Now I better enter into the path to know how to use this precious resource. So now we enter junior school, entry level, grade 1. And here in the first scope, the lowest capability of teachings, a teacher, and then Tsongkhapa get us to think about to increase our wake-up call, not to waste this precious life. He gets us to think about how it will end at any moment. Death is definite, people. The time of death is not definite. And so the conclusion point from these 3 points in this next step, entry level, the beginning, you entry into junior school now, first level of junior school. And now you think about how this precious resource is definite to end. We know these words. I mean, David has just been to, David, all of us, whether you're 9 or 99, David's just been to the doctors. You got a bit of a wake-up call. I don't know what the conclusion was, but, you just said it was a bit something or other, so we can understand. So whether we call dying or living, Lama Zopa says we divide the whole world into living people and dying people. I mean, like, what a joke. He says living people die before dying people every day. We have all these misconceptions in our mind. So we're trying to cut through these misconceptions at this next point to give ourselves, increase our wake-up call, not to waste this precious life, this precious resource. We have to energize to not want to waste it. So the conclusion point from this point about death and impermanence is, at the time of death, 1, given that my mind is a beginningless and endless continuity of mental moments. 2, crucially, that every millisecond of what I think and do and say sows seeds in my mind that will ripen in the future as my happiness or suffering. And that 3, I want happiness, and no, I don't want suffering. This is purely for our own sake. Don't get all caught up in compassion yet. That comes later. Be energized to know you want happiness and don't want suffering. So what does happiness mean? Bare minimum, get another human mummy, get a Buddhist human mummy, start early, don't wait till you're 74 to meet the Dharma. Get born to a nice Buddhist mummy who've got enough resources, they're patient and kind and loving, got good resources so you can start hearing these things, so you can continue without much of a break on your spiritual path. This would be the best. So then make sure you use this life in a skillful way. So that the conclusion here is, from the death one, then, given that I do want happiness and don't want suffering, And the only thing I know that I will take with me when this mind leaves the body is the mind. And therefore, I only want to bring my virtuous imprints with me. I'm going to have to bring some negative ones unless I get enlightened. But I don't want them to ripen. I want them to just be there latent. But at least get ahead of the game, you know, get another. So I conclude, I must increase my wish not to waste this precious life. Now we go to the next contemplation, and we start to contemplate, which, you know, is a bit, we don't like this kind of sort of a bit like hellfire and brimstone talk, to look at the possibilities of types of rebirth. And there could be lots of suffering rebirths. Well, we don't want those. So that gets us to the next one. Well, whom can I turn to? Where's the doctor? Here we rely upon the Buddha. He's our doctor. He's not our creator. He's our doctor. He's our advisor. He's our mentor. So we rely upon him. Please, Buddha, show me what to do then. I don't want future suffering, mate. Please show me what to do. That's refuge. Now we start to put our money where our mouth is. The conclusion of the lower scope junior school, we now abide by the laws of karma, which is now the real beginning of practice. All this is, the previous points are priming our mind ready for this next one. So what are you going to do with the law of karma? Everything you think and do and say so seeds in your mind. Negative ones ripen as suffering, positive ones ripen as happiness. So do as we do as well as we can, living in vows. We take the 5 layperson's vows, and we make commitments to try and not harm and blah, blah, blah. And then we purification. So by living in vows and purification and doing a bit of practice every day, this is the perfect recipe to ensure that when we do die, like I said before, we'll get this decent human life, decent Buddhist mummy with decent conditions. We cause it. We have to sow the appropriate seeds. We are the boss. We use Buddha. We rely upon Buddha. We trust the Buddha. He's our mentor. But honey, we do the work. This has got nothing to do with judgment and reward and punishment. No concept like that. That's very dualistic. Not for the Buddha. That's junior school. If you just get as far as there, you'd guarantee get another decent human body. So we can keep on moving without much disruption and get all the best conditions. Now we go to high school, middle scope. We can go further. We can become our own therapist. We learn the Buddhist model of the mind. We start to unpack and unravel the contents, the seeming chaotic contents of our mind, this big soup. We start to make sense of it. We start to distinguish the negative ones from the positive ones. This is the genius, brilliant job we have to do. I start to reprogram this mind of ours. This is the job, essence of it. Give up attachment, give up anger, give up the nonsense, and begin to grow the virtues. And this way we give up attachment, the next level. We can start to give up even the second kind of suffering. Now we can go to the compassion wing. Now, okay, if we graduated there at high school, at the middle scope, we graduate there, we would get shamatha then, we would get realization of emptiness then in one life or other. After that, we'd achieve our own nirvana, we'd achieve our own cessation of suffering. And when we die, we won't come back. That's how we programmed our mind. But we can go further with this precious human rebirth. We can go on to the compassion wing, university, the great scope. Continuing to work on our minds, that never changes. The practice of the ethics of restraint, restraining ourselves, refraining from harming. The first level is much more strict, refraining from harming others, because that will cause us future suffering. This next level is continuing not to harm, but it's in reference to how to break down the barriers between self and other, so we can eventually get bodhicitta, which is this outrageous paradigm shift in the mind, where now we only exist for others. And then we now go to the final stages of our practice, the final stages of university, and we get to the 6 perfections. And we went through the first 4, which are where you are perfecting life after life after life as this bodhisattva, life after life, perfecting generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance in relation to sentient beings. And now today we do the final stages where we can perfect the wisdom wing, if you like, by getting shamatha, single point of concentration, and then on the basis of which we can then unpack and unravel to the subtlest degree this nonsense, this entangled nonsense of stories deep in the bones of our beings, and finally see that there never has been, isn't, and never could be the fantasy I that we have thought since beginningless time has existed. Then you perfect that. then you become a Buddha. And then you hop onto the tantric path and speed it up because your compassion is so enormous, and you become a Buddha in the flash of in the 1 second. Not quite, but like that. That's how what we've talked about so far, except for the last bit, which we'll now talk about. Okay, so what I want to do, so first of all, we talk about what shamatha is, what single pointed concentration. That translates as, well, concentration translates as samadhi. Shamatha translates as, calm abiding. It's a state of concentration, single pointed concentration. And this is a Hindu technique. The genius Indians, well before the Buddha, they're the ones who came up with this. And they're the ones who went as far as they could go, going to even subtlest levels of this samadhi. And they thought that was the end result. That's the liberation. But Buddha found, no, he went as far as he could go. And he found there was still just mistakes in the mind. That's how he diverged in his own direction. He didn't chuck out what he'd learned already. Much of what he finds to be true is what these Indians before him had found to be true. He's got his own take on them. So he took this technique with him. He took much with him. He just went in a different direction after that. And particularly in relation to his own direct experiential findings about the nature of self. That's the crucial piece where he diverged. So we'll discuss that. But we need concentration first. So, as Lama Yeshe says in his wonderful Mahamudra book, and I want to read to you from Lama's book about some of the qualities you'd accomplish having accomplished calm abiding. They don't often do that in the text, but Lama wanted to get us excited. He wanted to get us enthusiastic. So he would always try to make us get a taste, So we'll do that. But as he says in there, he says it's utterly and completely impossible to realize emptiness, to cut the root of all delusions, to see for the first time that there never has been, isn't, and couldn't be that particular inherent intrinsic me that we've clung to. You've got to have single point of concentration. Because why is a logical reason, not a religious reason. It's because once you've got this single point of concentration, it's like the simplest way to put it is like you've accessed the microscope of your mind. And you can't see emptiness without a microscope. It's too subtle. It's too subtle. It's too subtle. The mistakes in our mind are too gross and too ancient and too vast. So you've got to get past that. And the only level of mind that's capable, is single point of concentration. I'm sorry, I have to do something urgent. Please forgive me. Okay, so let's look at the sort of the technicalities of single point of concentration. We won't go into too much depth, we don't have the time, but we'll go through a little bit. It's described in the text in nine stages of cultivation, and essentially, what you're trying to do in getting concentration is go between the two extremes that the mind is naturally tends towards. Either the extreme, as we all know very well all day, the uncontrolled chatting. This is utterly what we call normal in the world, and it is normal only because we don't have single point of concentration, and we don't have a technique in our culture. We don't have anything in modern psychology. We have nothing in modern psychology that we haven't got from the Buddhist and the Hindus in terms of this one, or maybe the Christians, We don't have anything in modern psychology. We have no method for completely harnessing the uncontrolled berserk thoughts. There's no such thing existing. It's only now that people are respecting more these genius Indians, that we're starting to take some of their techniques and use them. But there's nothing equivalent. So for us, it's so-called normal. So single point of concept. So the one tendency of the mind is it's an aspect of attachment. Attachment's multifaceted, okay? Like we talked so many times, especially in the middle scope, high school. Attachment is this dissatisfaction, this uncontrolled emotional hunger that feels like I'm missing something, that therefore always hankers after something. First level is, of course, the objects of the senses, and it's happening a million times a second. I mean, don't just think it's an occasional thing that pops up. It's intense, you know. So then it manipulates to get the object that is convinced such that when you get it, you'll get happy. And this is this process every second of the day, attachment is running the show. So primordial we don't notice. But one function of attachment, then, as we can see in the mind, is always chatting. And then especially when you're all perky and excited, one of its functions is to look forward to something. When you've got nothing to look forward to, what do you think that's called? That's the other extreme, completely depressed. So even emotionally, we can see all the chatty, excited, looking forward to something is attachment energy. And that's, we're familiar with that. But at this level, and then when you know, because you've got that kind of mind, or you're always thinking about this and thinking about that, and if only this and if only that, and maybe this and maybe that, then you sit down and try and concentrate. What a joke. You might just completely berserk. Within 3 seconds, you've forgotten what you're doing. That's called excitement, the one tendency. Now, the other one is, and we even emotionally can see it in our lives, when everything collapses, when the bubble bursts, when the boyfriend leaves you, and you just collapse to despair, emotionally, there's anything to look forward to. That's what depression is. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, so you kill yourself. These are the emotional extremes in daily life. I'm not joking when I say bipolar. Please don't think I'm being insulting. This is Buddhist analysis using modern words, you know. We live between this overexcitement and then despair. Variations of these. So there's technically the chatting kind of mind is the function of attachment. It's the mind of excitement that can't keep quiet. And the other one is, you know, the other extreme, when you sit down to meditate, you go straight to sleep. They call that politely dullness. Excitement and dullness. So from here to the 9th stage of concentration, you're perfecting, completely finishing with excitement and dullness. You found this miraculous state of focus. That's effortless. Once you've got this single point of concentration, you can go there effortlessly, and it's at a subtler level of mind that we don't even posit as existing. So it's an amazing, brilliant psychological skill. Don't think it was religion. And these genius Indians before the Buddha, they invented it, you know. So we can get this, and I'm going to read some of the qualities you'd have having accomplished that, just to get you excited, from Lama's book. But basically, it's a technical process where you go through, and even the most qualified people, and meaning in these days, with deluded ordinary people like you and me, it could take us 3 to 5 years to get this, sitting in one place, working at it 10, 12, 13 hours a day. So it's pretty intense. If you as Papankara says in 1920 in his Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, he talks about the fairly good practitioners getting it in 6 months. Well, clearly they were more advanced, more ready, you know. And even to be ready to go to the mountains, metaphorically or actually, to get this technique, you'd already have to be an advanced person. I always quote, you know, when I interviewed Venerable Rene, the Swiss monk, you must know him. Have you ever invited him to teach there, Nina?
Yes, we did, Venerable Robina.
And he comes.
When he's in Switzerland,
But I mean, what about by Zoom? You don't invite him on Zoom?
Well, we had a talk with him last year. And this year last year he taught every Wednesday on Zoom.
Okay, so you continue to invite him?
Yes.
I mean, I just, forgive me, but I really think, you know, I'm not, what do I know? But I know that I'm not where he's at. He's such a special person. Mm-hmm. You've got to invite him to do series on meditation or any topic. He's a really excellent, brilliant teacher and a holy being and a devoted student of Lama Zopa. He's like a perfect person for you. Please. Just to remind you, just in case. And just in case you might have forgotten. So anyway, Venerable Rene. He's Swiss. He's from where's he from? The other city. What is it? Geneva, isn't it? He's from the Geneva. Yes. Okay. So he's living in the States these days. But he's been a meditator from the time he met the Lamas. He met the Lamas about the same time as me. I don't remember, in our 70s. And I think he almost immediately started seriously getting into meditation. He became a monk. He lived for a while. He studied. So he told me when I interviewed him in 1995, that's 26 years ago, right? About one of his long retreats, his 2.5-year retreat, trying to cultivate single point of concentration at Urseling in Spain, this marvelous place named by His Holiness in 1982. remember there, I was there at the time with him. And it's like up in the mountains, in the Sierra Nevada there, a couple of hours out of Geneva, out of Granada. Perfect, as Holly said, perfect for meditation. Reminded him of Tibet. So Renee was there, Venerable Renee was there for 2.5 years. And I interviewed him in 95 about this retreat. And I interviewed him at Copan Monastery about this 2.5-year retreat, single point of concentration. But one of the things he said to me, he said, just to get ready, to be ready, to want to be in, to want to have this determination to never give up 8, 10, 12 hours every day for several years if you had to. Think of that. 99% of us sitting here right now, the minute, even just to sit for 5 minutes, we've got jobs to do, we've got the children to take care of, got the cat to feed, the mortgage to pay, the body to body to eat, to feed. I mean, you look at us, we're overwhelmed by day-to-day jobs. So to be ready to have that condition, to even begin to get single point of concentration, already pretty advanced, Pabanka talks about the prerequisites in Lam Rim. He talks about how you've got to have completely, whatever food whatever food you get, you're happy. Think of that now. Look at us now, the phenomenal, it's not being critical, it's just showing how we're not ready for it. So it shows how to be qualified, to be pretty intense, just to be able to put up with any food you're given. I mean, every one of us is so obsessed with food now. Every tiny label on everything you buy gives you all the details of all the nutritional value. It's not this and it's not that. It's got no gluten. It's got this and it's got that. Oil, this. I mean, that's the details because we've all got so many sicknesses. This is environmental karma, past killing. We're so neurotic without food. But to be the point where you've given up attachment for food, you've given up pretty much attachment for anything. You're very relaxed, means you're content with whatever you've got. You need to already be, and he said there was no way in the world he could have been able to go to the mountains, and it was literally, for that 2.5 years, unless he'd been a monk for several years, unless he'd done masses of purification, unless he'd done masses of teachings, and even unless he'd given teachings. They were the things that qualified him to even get to the mountains, to have the energy and the conditions and the time, mentally as well as physically, to try and get single point of concentration. So it's very humbling. Okay, so it's described in terms of 9 stages, and there's this gradual development of the mind, getting rid of the excitement, getting rid of the dullness, going to the more subtle levels until eventually you've got this effortless. It's like a person who's perfected playing Bach. I remember going to a friend of mine she gave me a birthday party. Yeah, she gave me a birthday party, my friend in Melbourne, Jane. And she invited her friend who's a piano tuner, but he plays the piano. And he's the kind of person you just say any tune, any name of any song since the last 100 years. And while he's chatting there, having a beer and smoking his cigarette and chatting to the friend next door, he's playing it. In other words, he's perfected music playing. A person who can go effortlessly to do anything and do it perfectly. That's what we're talking about, the level of concentration at this subtle level. When you've perfected it, it becomes effortless. So anyway, he was there for 2.5 years. He said he probably touched upon the 5th of the 9 stages in the first 6 months or first year, but he couldn't get past the 5th, which is an extra interesting point. And it's one of the points, actually. And this is the other thing he told me. He knew he couldn't get past that point, and he said because the conditions, he said, when your mind, especially if you're a fairly newish meditator, he'd been at it for 10 years, I think, 8 years. He said, not in that place, but in general, he said that, when the mind, and this is how they talk about death too, when your mind gets more subtle, when your mind goes to these subtler levels, you become incredibly sensitive to the tiniest disturbance, which is why Rinpoche throughout his book never ceases talking about the necessity for an absolutely quiet, peaceful, perfect condition for a person to die, because the mind is going to the subtler level. Well, then concentration is exactly the same. You're going to a more subtle level. That he said the tiniest shift in the wind could be so distressing. So this is an interesting point now. He knew he couldn't get further. So I interviewed him in Copan after this retreat. I don't know when the retreat was. I interviewed him in 95. Maybe it was a few years before. I don't remember. And this is what's fascinating. He said at Copan, and anybody who's been there knows it's a really busy place. It's in the Kathmandu Valley on a hill, all around you see the Kathmandu Valley. And he said, and it's busy, and these days very busy, with dogs barking in the morning and all the local Hindus playing all their prayers as loud as possible from the valley. And the kids in the monastery, the monk and nun kids going to the gompa to do their prayers, all shouting their mantras. So it's a noisy place. But he said that his mind got more subtle, more easily at Kopan than up in the mountains. So, and that's the point that it's indicating one of the key criteria for best to be most conducive to meditate. That criterion is it needs to have been blessed by the presence of holy beings, the Buddhas and the meditators. So all the Tibetans adore Kathmandu Valley. When we go there now, it's like this polluted, nightmarish place full of cars on top of each other, you know, the ring road full of bulls and trucks, but the holy energy there, and that's for me the proof of it, that his mind got more subtle, more easily at Kopan than this ideal scenario up in the mountains, you know, in Spain. That's a really powerful point, and that's one of the criteria for an excellent place to meditate. Various prerequisites that Prabhupada Rinpoche lays out, you know, have given up attachment, have no interest in food, no interest in all the other things of life, and no worries and no fears. I mean, this is the thing, even if you do a 3-month retreat, even 3 months, which is sounds enormous for us, but miniature if you compare it with 3 years, let's say. It takes a long time, doesn't it, for all the worries and all the things you had to do and the thing and the hubby and the kids and the this and the that and all the endless jobs we have, for that to eventually fade into the distance of your memory. You know, even as Renee said, when you first started the retreat, it takes a while for literally to stop all the stuff that you used to think about from coming into the mind. It takes ages for that to happen, which is why the ideal scenario for the greatest yogis to get the realizations most quickly is literally to disappear into the mountains as if you've gone to death. You know, the Geshe Lama Kontrog, this amazing yogi. I must read to you from him as well. You might need another class just to read all the wonderful stories of the yogis. It's more inspiring than hearing all the techniques. Where's my iPad?
We'd love to have a class like that. Venerable. Stories of yogis.
I know, it's amazing. So I want to read you from Lama Yeshe to get you all excited about the qualities you'd have, having just got single point of concentration. And the Buddha says we've had it in countless lifetimes. We just lost it. We didn't use it to realize emptiness. So we kept falling down the mountain. We didn't get to the peak and get over, you know. Let me get my iPad and I'll read you from Geshe Lama Kontrog's biography. I was probably in my computer anyway. Let me find it. Just hearing stories is inspiring, you know. Then you can go be excited to get the recipes. What's this one? Here we go. This will do. This will do. This one. I mean, I never got finished. I started it soon after he passed away in 2001, and then his attendant Geshe Sopa said I got to stop. So I'd stopped working on it about 2007, and we're starting it again. And I've sent him part of the draft of the biography, and I'm waiting to hear back from him. Geshe Tenzin Zopa, his attendant. So he was this amazing yogi, a friend of Lama's, and they knew each other at Sarah J in Tibet. He was born, Lama Zopa was born Lama Yeshe was born in 1935, and Geshe Lama Kontrog born in 27. And both showed really exceptional qualities from the time they were very tiny, you know. Lama Yeshe had been recognized, informally recognized. He wasn't formal because he was a reincarnation of some abbess. So Tibetans, being very patriarchal, didn't bother because he'd been reincarnation of a girl, you know, of a woman, of abbess. Anyway, whatever. But they knew each other, and they met up again Bodhgaya and Bodhanath years later. So the prologue to this book, basically Geshe Lama Kontrog, that was his nickname. Lama Kontrog means like the Lama refuge, and he was such a holy being at the monasteries. At Sarah J, his friends call him Lama Kontrog. So I don't know what his real name is, I forget. But he's known as Geshe Lama Kontrog. So he's this amazing being who studied incredibly at Sarah. Then when he escaped up into the mountains, basically just on the border of Tibet. And he stayed there for several years, disappeared into space, and no one saw him for years. He lived in a cave. The first 6 or 7 years in one cave, and he had nothing, nobody, no food, no sleep, nothing, didn't need anything. Tibetan doctors and the lamas make these pills, they call them chulen, taking the essence, which is, you know, they make these pills from all the subtle minerals, and, you know, because the Tibetan medical system is based on all the herbs and, you know, the world, the plants that grow. They can make these pills, and the yogis who live in the mountains in their caves can live on these, save time having to cook all the time, you know. but they get very skinny, but their energy gets very strong. Well, he was so advanced, he didn't even need these pills. He was able to live on what they call wind chulen. He was able to eat, he ate the air, basically. He was able to extract the energy from the air to survive for years. So he's up there for 6 or 7 years, and then these local villagers came along, and they were freaked out and thought he was a yeti or something. They chucked rocks at him, so he went off. And then he found another place under a juniper tree for a year and a half, 6 foot of snow in the winter, 2 meters of snow in the winter. But he made himself a little cave under the trees. And this is the point. Forget single point of concentration. The Hindus invented it. You needed to get emptiness on the Hinayana path. This is combined. He was a tantric practitioner who've got this particular ability for single point of concentration combined with the incredible bliss that's generated by seeing yourself as a deity. He was a Vajrayogini practitioner. This gorgeous naked red lady, the manifestation of purified attachment. Lama Tsongkhapa said he lived in Vajrayogini's pure land. So basically there he was, naked, except for, well, you'll hear the story. So basically he was in this cave, and then he got chucked out. Then he went under the juniper trees, and they chucked him out of there too. They found all the yak herders. And then he found a third cave where then he began to make connection with the local villagers. So this is the prologue to the book, okay? This is the prologue. Some of you might have heard it before. So basically he was a monk at 6, he became a monk at 6, went to Sarah J, studied, was a wild, outrageous kid, totally independent, did exactly what he wanted, where he wanted. He was his own boss completely. Nobody could tell him what to do. Nobody. He knew what he was into. He knew what he needed. He knew what he had to do. He ran his own life. He was an amazing being. So in the afternoon of an early spring day in 1965, the yak herder Pasang was climbing the mountains above his village, Burshi, not far from the border of Tibet in northwest Nepal. Pasang was looking for his yaks, which he'd sent out to pasture that morning. The mountains facing the north are extremely dry with very little grass. Following their tracks, he could see. This is, okay, the author of the book is Geshe Chenza Zopa, but it's me who's writing it. I interviewed him and then sort of it's channeling him. He'd never been this far before. It was very rugged up there and not easy to get to. Normally yaks are quite haphazard in their eating habits. Left alone, they graze here and there, gradually moving on and up. They can go for miles in a day, eating their way into very dangerous situations. Many animals fall over the cliffs. Pasang crossed the waterfall and could see them a few hundred yards away, grazing up the mountainside. He needed to find the lead yak so that he could herd them down. There were 10 of them. Show, come, he shouted. Then he noticed just above the yaks a person. He wasn't even sure that it was a person, sitting in a hole in the rock face. He squinted his eyes and took a careful look to make sure he wasn't imagining things. He didn't know what to think. The person appeared huge and he seemed to be naked. There were caves up there, and one of them, the Cave of the Doves, is famous for being the home 900 years earlier of the great Milarepa. But no one ever lived there now. Not these days, Pasang thought to himself. Who knew who this was? He wondered if it was a yeti. In the mountains, there's a strong belief in the existence of these mythical beings, said to look a bit like gorillas. Or it could even be a demon. I mean, if he was a man, he must be crazy. What's he doing up there on his own in the middle of nowhere? Pasang was alone. It was getting dark, and the clouds were moving quickly across the sky, covering the top of the mountains. He was scared. He gathered his yaks and he got out of there. Back at Burshi, the villagers decided they had to get rid of this intruder. Whoever he was, they didn't feel good about him. They were genuinely fearful that he would bring harm to the village. The next day, Pasang led 2 of his friends up the mountain to check out this apparition, armed with their slingshots. Up there, do you see him? He said. They shot several rocks at the figure, hoping to scare him away. The next thing they see is this person carrying a small pack on his back, rushing out of the cave and almost flying up the mountain, hardly touching the ground as he went. They couldn't believe their eyes. They were relieved. Now he was gone. 2 years later, a 4-hour walk west of the Cave of the Doves, the old monk Rinchen Wangchuk was returning to his tiny house in Ganden Mountain where he lived in meditation. He'd made the house from rocks years ago and spent the winters here, coming down from Mugompa, his monastery, 8 hours further up the mountain on the route to Tibet. Now that he was old, he wanted to spend all his time in his little hut in solitary retreat. He could have found a suitable place near his monastery. It's on one of the highest peaks and is one of the most isolated places in the region. But this is far the very top end of Nepal, just near the border of Tibet. But he knew Ganden Mountain was blessed by the energy of the Buddhas Vajrayogini and Hayagriva, and always the best place to meditate is a place that has been blessed by the presence of the holy beings. And of course, the great Milarepa had laid his holy feet on these mountains hundreds of years before. He had a close relationship with the people of Chokhangparo, one of the nearby villages where he was born. From his hut, he would visit his relatives for tsampa, for his roasted barley flour and other supplies, and of course, to perform prayers for them. He was happy in his retreat place, isolated from the village and in sight of no one. But in the spring of 1967, he found that he had a neighbor. It was late afternoon. He was returning from the village with supplies, but for some reason he took a different route, one he'd never used before. About 10 minutes from his hut, when he glanced over to the northeast, he noticed something moving among the rocks higher up. There seemed to be a person outside what looked like a cave. The mist was already falling, so it wasn't clear. For 2 years now, there'd been rumors circulating around the villages about a mysterious person, a madman perhaps, even a yeti, who'd been chased away from the Cave of the Doves by the villagers of Bushi. He was a bit anxious at first. He wasn't sure whether it was a person or indeed whether the fears of the villagers were based in reality. When you're in retreat, you want to be isolated, and he didn't know what to think about this new presence. Back at his hut, he couldn't get this stranger out of his mind. The very next morning, after his pre-dawn meditation session, he did some more investigating. He went to the spot from where he'd seen the movement. He watched until the sun not only touched the cave, but was shining down on the village and the valley. But this time he didn't see any sign of life, nothing at all. He was reluctant to go there. It could be a yeti after all. Although irrational, he just wasn't sure. By now, he was really curious. His mind was full of it all day. He couldn't even meditate well. Again, next morning, he went to look. Again, nothing. This time, he decided he'd go to the... Hang on. This time, he decided he'd go to the cave itself and find out. He made his way stealthily through the bushes, a 10-minute trek through the brush and up the mountain. He was to the left of the cave, but because of the rocks in his path, he couldn't see inside. He crept closer, but still kept to the side, dropping a stone onto the rocky outcrop that formed the roof. 4 times he threw stones, but nothing happened. Then he crept around to the front of the cave and he looked inside the doorway, a hole in the rock face. There was a man, almost naked, sitting unmoving in meditation. He seemed so powerful, huge, strong. Rinchen Wangchuk was amazed by his presence. Even though his hair was down his back and wild looking, he could see that the meditator was a monk. He was wearing just a piece of his maroon robes covering his secret parts, with the rest of his body naked. His palms weren't in his lap in the usual meditation mudra, but open, each hand resting upwards on each knee, his thumbs curled inwards, resting in the palm. He had long, straggly whiskers hanging down either side of his mouth, but almost no hair on his upper lip or on his chin. His face was very rough, dark and weather-beaten. The cave was bare, nothing at all. Just this meditator sitting on what seemed like a worn animal skin on the hard, rocky ground. Rinchen Wangchuk couldn't imagine how he could survive like this. And who was he? He decided this must be the person the Bushi villagers thought was a yeti, the person they'd chased away. He stood at the open doorway for a long time, just watching this amazing man meditate. But his mind was full of so many conflicting thoughts. Maybe he was crazy. How could someone live like this? And by the look of him, he could have been meditating for years. He, of course, knew all the stories about, because the great meditators, when they got single point of concentration, you could stay like that for weeks. You don't need to move even, you just because you're in your subtle mind. He, of course, knew all the stories about Milarepa, one of the most beloved and successful meditators of Tibetan history. Everybody knew them, how he'd left the world and gone to the mountains, moving from cave to cave, naked, living on nettles, and eventually gaining the supreme goal of enlightenment. His songs are known and loved by all Tibetans and their Nepalese Buddhist neighbors. Reading about this is one thing, but to see someone looking just like Milarepa would have looked, living in a bare cave for who knows how long, was something else. It was hard to believe. It seemed impossible. It was certainly the first time that Rinchen Wangchuk had witnessed such a person. Of course, he had received empowerments himself into the highest practices during his time in Tibet, but seeing someone actually embodying the practice in such a radical way, that was not within his experience. He was also beginning to feel a little embarrassed. If this man really was a great meditator, how rude to disturb him like this, throwing stones. He decided to return to his hut. But the image of this yogi overwhelmed him during his own meditation sessions. He couldn't think of anything else. He began to feel very good about him, very safe somehow. He was drawn to him and wanted to get his own session finished quickly so he could get back to the cave. On the fourth day, after his mid-morning session, he went back. Again, there was the yogi in meditation. Nothing had changed since yesterday. He was absolutely still, unmoving, like a rock. Sorry, I've got a bit of asthma these days. I'm always complaining about my health, aren't I? I'm sorry. Hang on. I've got a cough and splutter. Rinchen Wangchuk couldn't contain himself. He was compelled to talk to him. From the doorway, he quietly said, "May I know who you are? May I offer you some food?" There was no reply, no acknowledgement, nothing. The meditator remained in samadhi. Rinchen Wangchuk was becoming convinced that here was a genuine practitioner, and he was yearning to connect with him. He longed to receive teachings from this holy being. Again, he asked his question, and again, but again, nothing. He watched him for a long time and then left. He cooked his lunch, did his afternoon session, thinking only about the yogi who filled his mind. He returned to the cave. Now he sat on the ground just in front of the door of the cave with the afternoon sun at his back. He was but a few feet from the meditator who was sitting facing the doorway. His heart reached out to him. There was no sign of any food. He said very quietly, "You must eat food. I have food. May I offer you some?" No response. Clearly, his efforts were getting him nowhere. Perhaps he was pushing too hard. Perhaps he'd better just leave him alone. But he couldn't let go of it. He had to meet this great man and receive his teachings. To receive personal instructions from someone who had direct experience of the practices was a rare and precious thing. He yearned for realizations himself and could not bear to turn away from this unbelievable opportunity. After a restless night, he returned to the cave as soon as he had finished his pre-dawn session. This time he brought an offering, something auspicious, his small wooden bowl piled high with barley grain and a lump of salt. The grains for growth, expansion, and the salt when offered to a lama for the wealth of the Dharma. The meditator was there as usual, naked, in samadhi. Rinchen Wangchuk knelt before him. Holding his gift high, he extended it towards him. "Great yogi, may this offering create a spiritual relationship between us. May I know who you are? Where are you from?" This time, the meditator opened his eyes and spoke. "I am nobody. Leave me alone." His gaze was almost unbearable, powerful, piercing, steady. His voice was soft, but his words were firm. Rinchen Wangchuk's heart was beating fast. He implored him, "I'm requesting sincerely that you teach me the holy Dharma." "It is not possible," the yogi replied. But nothing could stop Rinchen Wangchuk now. Whatever you demand of me, I'm ready to follow. I will do exactly as you instruct. The yogi hadn't moved, his palms still resting upwards on his knees, his legs in full lotus position. After a long silence, he said, "What you're wanting is harder than you can imagine. But I'm ready, I promise. Please teach me. I've lived at Mugompa for 40 years and I've studied in Tibet. Now I yearn to practice seriously and gain realizations. I'm trying my best to stay in solitary retreat, but I feel that I lack the blessings of the realized gurus. I am convinced you must be a great yogi. I beg you to give me teachings." The yogi kept his gaze on the old monk bent low before him. For 7 years, he'd had no contact with human beings. To fulfill the goal of buddhahood, his heartfelt wish, he needed this utter isolation. Once he'd accomplished it, he could then effortlessly join the world again, now fully capable of benefiting others. If this monk was not serious, it would be a waste of time, a complete distraction. But he could see the mind of this old monk, his sincerity, his devotion. Perhaps the time was right. If you follow me, you must stay in retreat for the rest of your life. If you can do that, I will give you the empowerments and the commentaries and guide you in your meditations. Rinchen Wangchuk was ecstatic, unbelievable, like finding a treasure. He had found a Lama, a true knowledge holder. At last, he could achieve the purpose of his life, the realizations of the path, just like all the holy beings of the past, right back to Lord Buddha himself. But this must not go beyond us, the yogi said. I have vowed to spend the rest of my life in solitary retreat, isolated from everyone. No one must know. I promise I will do exactly as you say, said Rinchen Wangchuk. That's the prologue. So basically, he's got single point of concentration, which has gone beyond the normal level of distractedness, able to access easily, effortlessly, especially being a tantric practitioner. The practices in Tantra enhance the ability to do this even more powerfully. And his mind is at a subtle level. So the whole point about this is very abstract for us because we can't comprehend what's he doing. What's he doing there, sitting there for year on end in subtle meditation? It just sounds so abstract to us. But what you're doing is real serious work at a subtle level of unpacking and unraveling the eons and eons and eons of ancient misconceptions to the mind, to the point where finally you've removed all the obstacles. So first of all, you remove the obstacles to you get the concentration. Then you realize emptiness, and that for sure he would have had. Then you realize bodhicitta, that for sure he would have had. And then you do the continuous work, practicing these tantric practices that are super speedy, that help you quickly remove all the obstacle from mind, and you become a Buddha. It's kind of called the quick path to enlightenment, you know. Lama Tsongkhapa said he lived in Vajrayogini's Pure Land. So the book's about his story. Can't do it. So what's the time? 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock. It's 1 hour, right? Can we have a 5-minute break, please? 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about single point of concentration, and we have to squeeze in emptiness, and we have to have another day, and we can't help it. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes, Venerable.
I'm back. So now, everybody. So now let me read from Lama Yeshe's Mahamudra. Lama Yeshe's, let me read from Lama Yeshe's Mahamudra. This Mahamudra book coming out last year, I think, from Wisdom, is a particular approach to realizing emptiness. It's usually taught in the it's a sutra practice, but there's always, and then it's got a tantric level of it, but it's always given in the framework of having received a highest yoga tantra practice. And Lama Yeshe gave this first in Australia, and Mahamudra is a commentary of that teaching in 1980. I forget, 2 or something. I can't remember the year. Yeah. And the first time that he gave a tantric highest yoga tantra empowerment, the first time a highest yoga tantra empowerment, I think, was given in Australia. He gave Haruka Chakrasambhara. So, okay. So Lama's book then, as I said, Lama has spent this basically Mahamudra is the first, it's concentration meditation, and then a particular way in the second mode of meditation of how to get insight into emptiness using these 2 modes. But it's a very specific approach, a particular approach. So in here, Lama, I just want to read from Lama. I'll find the book for you. Mahamudra. Where is it? There it is. Mahamudra. Current editing. What's this? Okay. Here we go. Well, that's the cover. That's no good. I mean, the cover's lovely, but it's can't read the cover. Changes. No, can't find it. Here we go. All right. So in this chapter, as I said in the text, he goes in the Lam Rim, he talks about how to cultivate this concentration. He just goes through the 9 stages, giving these technical terms for each of those 9. And as you're progressing, and it's auspicious to hear those, just to put the imprint into the mind, but it gives there's no experience. It's not experiential, it's just technical, which is important. But here, Lama wanted to be experiential. Lama wanted to excite us, get us inspired. And this is a sutra practice. So, okay, finally, what's this? I've got something here. All right. Before meditating on the mind, what it is, now meditating on the mind. Before meditating on the mind, we establish what it is. Okay. The benefits, chapter 5, the benefits of samadhi are incredible, is the name of the chapter. Okay, chapter 5. Without calm abiding, we cannot realize Mahamudra. Mahamudra is a Sanskrit word that's literally referring to emptiness, the word emptiness, the absence of intrinsic existence. And we better rush to get it, hadn't we? We've got 45 minutes left. We'll see how we go. So as I mentioned, to achieve the realization of Mahamudra, the reality of non-duality, we first need to develop calm abiding. In fact, it is not possible without it. We must achieve the subtler levels of consciousness of indestructible, one-pointed concentration, which in Sanskrit we call samadhi. It is difficult to realize non-duality, emptiness, not because it's hiding from us, but because our concepts are so thick. In other words, and we're going to talk about this absence of intrinsic existence, which sounds so kind of passive, the absence of something. We can't get our head around that. We'll discuss it. To realize that is not something hidden from us. It's not that the reason we can't realize the emptiness of this and that and the computer and everything else, because everything is empty, is because they're staring at us. It's like we're colorblind. You can't see what's in front of you because the delusions are so strong. So we must refine our concepts. We must achieve subtle mindfulness, subtle awareness, and subtle clarity. Otherwise, there is no way we can see the unconscious levels of ego grasping an independent self. Not possible. Samadhi is the source of liberation. Without perfect samadhi, then there is no way to become liberated from samsara and no way to achieve enlightenment. There is no exception, whether we're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, or Buddhist. To cut the dualistic view, we need calm abiding. In other words, you need to access the microscope of your mind. It's a literal point, not some kind of religious point. Like a tiny atomic something, you've got to have a microscope. You can't see it with the naked eye. Same here. Except it's the mind we're talking. The level of conceptuality and sensory consciousness, which is the level we function at, is the grossest tip of the iceberg of our capacity for cognition. So, but calm abiding is not enough. On the other hand, some people actually think that this state of samadhi, this one-pointed concentration, is all we need in order to cut ego. You could argue that's where he diverged from the Hindus. They got to the subtlest level of mind. They've given up the grosser level of suffering. They've given up the next level of suffering, but they haven't given up the subtlest, because the Buddha had found that still there was some semblance of misconception that posited something intrinsic and inherent and permanent and uncaused. And that's where he diverged in his own direction. They hadn't gone far enough, he said. On the other, okay, all right, but that is wrong. Concentration on its own is not enough. Lama Tsongkhapa reminds us that calm abiding alone is not enough to cut the dualistic view. We also need to develop special insight, or vipassana in Sanskrit. In Tibetan, we call it hlak tong. Hlak meaning extra and tong meaning seeing. Well, the word insight is very delicious in English. I've noticed in several languages, it's a very arcane, strange word, but listen to the actual literal meaning, insight, inner seeing. It's a very simple word. Don't think it's fantasies. It's just very powerful. So vipassana is misunderstood a lot, because there indeed is a common type of meditation the world knows as vipassana. And indeed, Buddha taught many types of insight meditation. So the one that's popular is based on your concentration. You then go to the second mode, and then you use that focused mind to sort of scan the sensations of your body. I mean, I've never done it, but it's a Buddhist technique. So what does Buddha want you to get insight into there? We get very confused. We think he wants us to get insight into how our body works. I mean, ridiculous. He couldn't care less about the body. The reason you want to scan the experiences of your body, so you begin to get insight into impermanence. Buddha taught many levels of insight. Here, it's a more sophisticated one. He wants us to get insight into emptiness, the most subtle thing. So we can interpret this to mean that we go beyond seeing conventional reality and achieve the extra seeing of the universal reality of Mahamudra. Emptiness, in other words. In other words, we need the two kinds of meditation together, calm abiding and special insight. So the benefits of samadhi are incredible. Nevertheless, even without special insight, the results of samadhi alone, or shamatha, a level of it, are unbelievable, almost unimaginable. So, of course, he's referring to what we believe is possible in the modern world, where we discuss neuroscience and the brain. It's just, this is why we just think it's religious. We put it into that too hard basket, or just the cosmic basket. It's so insulting. We're talking, this is psychology, nothing but psychology. When we understand this, when we realize how amazing the results are, we cannot help but try to develop it. There is no way we become lazy. We will have much energy and make great effort. We won't even worry about eating. I will explain some of the benefits. You go beyond sensory and conceptual consciousness. So already that's cosmic. Already there's nothing equivalent in neuroscience, because at this subtler level, you don't need a brain. The brain doesn't have a function. The brain only works in relation to the gross level of consciousness. So as your concentration develops, you will go beyond your body. Your mind will be non-conceptual. So it becomes easy to cut the complex world of the 5 sense objects, to eliminate all the superstitions. It's one of the many terms the Tibetans use, and Lama uses it a lot, superstition, as a synonym of delusion. It's quite literal. When you're full of attachment, literally it's making up something on that plate that doesn't exist there. The chocolate cake that is on the plate is not the chocolate cake that you see through attachment. You've made up a story and you can't tell the difference between your story and the reality. So it's literally a superstition. And that's what Buddha is saying. We live in these delusions. That's why we suffer. In such a unified state of this concentration, your mind becomes so subtle, so sharp, you can easily eradicate the complex dualistic thoughts. You can touch reality. This is the feature of samadhi. And out of meditation, you can easily deal with your delusions. They are so light, you can stop them immediately. Well, you just have to try and imagine this. Right now, the normal world for all of us, even when your mind is relatively peaceful, that we know there are like 1,000 thoughts a second. They're just rumbling there continuously. This will no longer be the case. And because it's sort of like you've now got this effortless control over every tiny thought. This is literally inconceivable in modern science and psychology, but this is what these genius Indians have discovered well before the Buddha. This technique is extant, thoroughly living and proper, still existing. It almost seems hard to imagine this. You experience bliss. This sounds so weird, you get almost nervous. It sounds a bit like a sin, doesn't it? Bliss, wow. In the subtle state of concentration, you experience bliss, ecstatic bliss, just naturally. So this is telling us about the nature of our mind. This is Buddha's entire point. The only way this is back in high school, the only way we know how to get pleasant feelings, happiness, forget about bliss, is to get an object of the senses. That's it. It's all the only way we know. Buddhists are saying, hey guys, I've got a method. And he attributes it to his previous Indian brothers and sisters. You've got to get single point of concentration. Then the bliss of your own mind is just naked to you, and your mind is utterly and completely and joyfully blissful. He used the word rapture. God knows where Lama got these words. He just knew the right words to find, I tell you. Because it's the natural state of your mind when it's unencumbered, even temporarily, by delusions. This is natural. In the beginning, the bliss you experience is physical, which is the grosser level. He's talking about being in meditation. But as your concentration deepens, as you throw off the layers of blankets of grosser consciousness, you experience bliss exclusively at the mental level. Again, we can't posit that. This is because you've stopped perceiving the objects of the 5 senses. You have closed the doors to superstition. All the contradictory concepts have disappeared. Your mind is now crystal clear. And we're not talking about having a flash of this. We're talking about accomplishing this in a stable way to the point where it's there all the time. And if you go into meditation, you'll just go straight there, like when you've perfected that piano playing, like I said before, As if you could count every atom. As your concentration gets stronger and you reach ever subtler levels, your mind becomes super powerful. From his own experience, Lama Tsongkhapa says that you can reach a point of such clarity in your meditation that your mind feels almost infinite. Your mind is so clear, so sharp, it's as if you can distinguish all the subtle physical energies. You'll have the courageous thought, I can count all the atoms of the universe. This level of mind is more powerful than even scientific instruments. He's not joking, It's just that this doesn't exist in our culture. You will experience never mind that one. You'll always be joyful. This sounds hilarious. When you first arise from your meditation, You feel liberated instead of uncertain and full of doubts and conflicts. You experience inner peace. You always experience a happy, joyful vibration. In fact, you continuously experience tremendous pleasure. So now the pleasure of chocolate is nothing to you, nothing. What you can now experience with your mind is super. It's like another realm, another dimension. And when your senses do come into contact with their objects, of course, you experience bliss then too. So it's like a bonus, you know. We don't have any bliss until you get the sense object. But here, you've tasted the bliss of your own natural mind because you've accomplished single point of concentration. So the cake is a bonus, but you don't need it because you're totally blissful, totally content, totally satisfied. That's the point. You hardly even notice whether it's night or day. Actually, even now, when you have samsaric happiness, you have a similar kind of experience. You dance and drink all night, intoxicated with the pleasure. Time just flies. Well, this is what happens when you're intoxicated with the blissful experience of samadhi. Your body feels so light. When you're out of meditation, the heavy energy of your body vanishes. Your body feels like a brand new body. You feel so light, almost as if you could fly, almost as if you had no body at all. They say when you've got this concentration, you access this very particular subtle level of physical and mental pliancy, they call it, like something unimaginable, the lightness, you know. You develop clairvoyance. Lama Tsongkhapa says that you will develop clairvoyance. According to the Abhidharma teachings, there are two kinds of clairvoyance. One is what we understand as intuition, an untrained sense that we all have to some extent. For example, you might feel strongly without any logical proof that something has happened to your dear friend back home. The other can be gained by training the mind in meditation, as we're discussing here. You are able to see long distances as well as other people, including their minds. At first, your experiences seem a bit like a dream, but the more your concentration develops, the more clearly you can see, just as you would if you were there in person. Maybe, you know, so this kind of clairvoyance is not imagining something. It's real in the present, not a fantasy. In other words, this is the capacity of your subtler level of mind when you've subdued the grosser levels of conceptuality and sensory. And again, I keep repeating, we don't posit such states of mind in the modern psychological neuroscientific models, you know. So just to give you a taste, doesn't it sound exciting? That's our potential. But it takes, you know, it's hard work to get there. So talking about Geshe Konchog level, I mean, in Zurich it'll be like that when in the winter and you go out to put your rubbish out, let's say, and it's 5 degrees below or whatever it is, you know, and the bitter cold. So then I think of Geshe Konchog, naked, 2 meters of snow, in a hole in the wall, no food, no people, no possessions, just his mind. And from training for years and years and years and all his previous life, all his earlier life as well, you know, to the point to get such clarity, such brilliance, such perseverance. And what drives these yogis is not the bliss, it's bodhicitta, you know. It's their unbelievable compassion for sentient beings. So the bliss in a way is like a bonus. But it's like an energy that enables your mind to get this subtle level so that you can remove all the obstacles from your mind. It's a very technical point, especially in Tantra, you know. So I think now it's half an hour to go. Let's see how we go. Let's ask some questions now about anything at all, certainly what I've talked about today. No, I've lost my water. Here it is. Ask me some questions.
Please unmute yourself, raise your virtual hand, or type in the chat. Okay, Basu has a question.
Okay, go, Basu, talk to me.
Thank you, Venerable. That was nice, this talk.
Good.
I have few questions. I will start with the important ones and then I can ask the useless ones also. So first of all, I wanted to ask about any book that mentions the stages of the single pointed concentration, and you just told that maybe we can follow this book by
Well,
Lama.
Yeshu's book Mahamudra is one of them. He doesn't go into the details of the techniques, but there's lots of books. I think if I think a book, there's an American author, American scholar and practitioner called what's his name? What's his name?
Alan Watts?
Alan Wallace. Wallace. He's done a lot of retreats and teaches these things. But any book that you've got on the Lam Rim, there's a whole package of all the teachings. There'll always be a section in there about how to accomplish single-pointed concentration. So I think if you Google it and get a Tibetan author or a Tibetan Buddhist author, then you'll get, I mean, there's many involved. I can't think of any now, but you'll definitely find one. But it's got to be seen in the context of the bigger picture, you know. But yes.
The next question is also attached to this first one. So if I understood it properly, when we have the single point concentration and to that subtle level, which you just said, then we can also have a clairvoyance, and with that clairvoyance, it is also possible to even see in distance people what they are doing, like you are physically present.
Yeah.
But isn't that so that when we reach that subtle level of single pointed concentration, we do not have any thought, or it's the thoughtless state? Then how come?
I didn't answer your last part, Bashu. What was the last point?
People say that initially when you sit in meditation, you have lots of thoughts, and then these thoughts starts to disappear, and then there is this no mind state or thoughtless state. And
no,
then,
I didn't use those terms, Bashu. That people use those terms, but they're not the words I used. So what's the actual question again? Just ask me the question again.
The question is, when we see anything in the clairvoyance, do you think that at that subtle level of concentration, we can have thoughts?
When you've got single point of concentration, when you've gone beyond the grosser level of mind, you're not thinking or seeing anything. But when you come out of your meditation, that's when you retain that capacity. And the Buddha would teach that we need this. The real benefit of clairvoyance is that you can benefit others. You know how to benefit others exactly because you see their past, you see their karma, and you could advise them perfectly. So it's a natural state of the mind to be this level of capability, but the only reason to have it is to be based on compassion and to want to help others.
So I have three more very stupid questions. So one of them is that, for example, peoples like us have families or spouses, and I would say my spouse is Catholic, and she doesn't likes Buddhism or Bodhisattva.
I understand.
Forming.
Sure.
Yeah. And the problem is, so when you go, for example, in India, if you are going along with if I'm going along with my wife, and suddenly some shit things happen because of her past actions, which ripen, she would like me to take in charge. But if I do something, I will also develop negative karma. So what Buddhism says about...
No, that's okay, Bashu. That the bigger picture there is, if this is your relationship, if this is your wife, that implies you have actually chosen it. Now, often in very traditional cultures, which how we all were once, but now we're so degenerate in the West, but in the modern world, but in India, still very traditional. So, you know, you probably, I don't know if you got married because you fell in love, or you got married because you chose it, or you got married because you thought you should. But at this point, you've got to start making some choices, Bashu. You've got to decide if this is my life, I have chosen this wife, I have chosen this relationship, I have chosen this job. You've got to consciously do that. However you first went into it, that's another discussion. Or you choose to leave it, Bashu. There's one or other choice, but it's a crucial step you have to go through. All of us, you have to, it's sort of like a person's in a really terrible job. Instead of just, you're not complaining, I'm not saying that, but I'm talking. So I've got to make a decision. Is this job worthwhile? Can I make the most of it? Can I learn something from this job instead of just moaning about it? In other words, I've got to choose, okay, I will stay in this job, or Bashu, I choose to leave. That has to be your first step. So let's assume you've chosen this wife, this relationship. She's a Catholic, you're a Buddhist, whatever. This is the life you've got. So you have to find the ability to do your practice, to be silent, to be private about it, not to show it. It's your own personal path, regardless of what she does. And then according to your sense of ethics and your sense of what you think is right, you do what is wise and beneficial to your wife. What she expects and what you think is appropriate, they could be two different things. You have to make that decision. You don't necessarily give them lectures, but you've got to find the way. This is the life you've chosen, so you have to navigate this life to be what you want to be. And if we don't choose it, Bashu, often we feel like a victim. It's not fair. I shouldn't be having to do this. But this, you've got to have this very firm decision first. This is my life. This is my wife, and I want this job. I want this situation. Once you say that and you're clear, then you can navigate it appropriately and wisely. That's the bigger answer.
Thank you very much. I was quite confused on that part. Another thing is that many people actually try to worship or send offerings to their dead parents. What Buddhism says about this? Is it important? Is it required?
No, what's important is to make offerings not to the dead parents. That's useless, but to the Buddhas on behalf of the dead parents. Then they can get some merit from that. You don't make, I mean, there is a particular thing you do. Lama Zopa talks about it in his book, How to Face Death Without Fear. Many of the practices you can do for your dead parents, such as, for example, you get their ashes and you have them blessed. There's a very special practice that it's called Jangwa. It's a long thing that the lamas would do, the gurus would do, that blesses the remains of your parents. Then that will benefit your parents. And then you can mix those blessed ashes in a little kind of stupa or a statue. Then there is benefit for your parents because their ashes are mixed with the image of a Buddha. So then when you make offerings to that Buddha, your parents get the benefit.
Even if they have got the rebirth in whatever form.
Oh, of course. It's still benefit for them. Of course.
And one last question, Venerable. Is the ripening of the seed is a sequential process or a random process? I asked this.
If karma is a natural law, it can't be random. It can't. Sequential meaning what? The seed that's more strong will ripen first. The seed you planted the latest, the earliest will ripen first. It's a natural law. It can't be random. So obviously with any seed, the different conditions apply. For example, you might have the seed to be stolen from. Let's say you got that from 27 lives ago, and suddenly in this life, you start stealing. That will nourish that seed you planted 27 lives ago, and now suddenly you will get stolen from because it's kind of like you're putting fertilizer on it. So it's just the analogy of seeds and fruits is a very good one, but it's a natural law. It can't be random.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I heard that, or I have read or heard that Milarepa got this samadhi in 6 months, but
he probably easily, yeah. And he was attached.
And he was doing meditations like 8-10 hours.
Of course, that's right. Exactly.
What do you think for us people like us? Do we get ever a single point?
But you've got to leave your wife and family and job and give up sex, drugs and rock and roll and mortgages and pets and worries and grandchildren and children and parents and grandparents and go to the mountains for 2-3 years like Venerable Renee did. No choice. There's no choice. Unless, Bashu, you've come into this life already with high realizations in which you can do it in between times. But most of us aren't highly realized. So you've got to have very proper conditions to do it. Do you understand?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. But we can still try a bit every day. There's no harm in that. And you make aspirations every day. So a friend of mine who is married and he's been a Buddhist for 40 years, he married and then they became Buddhists and they had children. And he's decided this is the right thing for me, but he makes aspirations every day. When the time is right, may he become a monk and may he become a meditator and find all the right conditions. So by saying those aspirations, that will cause you to do it eventually when the time is right, Bashu. Have long-term view, okay? All right, good. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes. Next one is Bodhin.
Yeah, Bogdan.
Good, Bogdan, talk to me.
Hello, Venerable. In reference to what Bashu said, it just arose. I wanted to know if you make the decision to meditate for 2 or 3 years in the mountains, to what extent do we need to acquire like intellectual knowledge about the whole Buddha Dharma?
This is the point that Venerable Renee said. He said there was no way in the world he was qualified to go into intense retreat to get single-pointed concentration without having become a monk, without living in vows, without doing lots of purification, without doing lots of serious study, and even without having taught seriously. You've got, and concentration meditation cannot be seen in isolation because the mind is such an intense thing. Many people who've got some karma to meditate, they will go off, and as Lama Yeshe says in the book, they end up in a psychiatric hospital because they haven't got a clue in heaven what their mind is all about. They've got no idea why things are coming up. They've got no way of it's sort of like you put yourself in the middle of the forest in the Amazon and you start to try to become a gardener, but you don't know botany. You'd go mad in a month. It's like that, Bogdan. You've got to have the background, you've got to have the purification, and you've got to have the knowledge, the philosophical knowledge of what the mind is and all the teachings, and understand impermanence, understand emptiness. You've got to have that. You can't do it otherwise. You just go mad. You won't last. You'll go crazy. You see my point?
Definitely. And to what extent, like, or it probably also depends on the mind, right?
It is a person, Bogdan. Yes, of course it does. Of course it does, yeah.
Okay. Another question. So I was quite fascinated by the fact that the yogis don't have to eat anything.
Not all. It's only the highest yogis can live like that.
Yeah. And how does that work out? What is the process behind it?
Because when you understand the tantric model of the universe, and I've discussed this many times, but I'll say it again here in reference to this, the universe is, the Vajrayana model talks about how the universe consists of sentient beings, minds, mind streams, which are not physical. And then the rest of the universe consists of matter, and that's made of the 4 elements. Okay, the entire universe is made of the 4 elements. And there are many universes, but the point is this, the fundamental point to understand is that all minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the 4 elements. So the very subtle mind, the one that leaves the body at the time of death, is inextricably linked with the very subtle wind energy, which is the subtlest level of the 4 elements. This is just the nature of the universe. It's just how things are. So according to when we then manifest in our new body, so Lama Tsongkhapa says in the Kala Chakra Tantra, all these different tantras, these texts giving detailed descriptions, of this more subtle level of the universe. So that according to the Kala Chakra Tantra, Rinpoche says, there are these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external energies. Internal is the mind, external is the wind energies. So they've got subtle and gross levels. So then even as Lama Tsongkhapa says, if your mind, even as I say, is angry, first you pollute your mind with a habit to be angry. It stays in your consciousness and you develop the habit, but that impacts instantaneously upon the wind energies that are connected to your anger. And that causes you, if in the future you pollute your winds, which is physical, and eventually that manifests as sickness. And eventually, over a much longer time, that impacts upon the external elements, which is causing the imbalance of the external elements. This explains how we create the universe. Everything starts in the mind. That's the first point. So now, if everything comes from the mind, and there's a great yogi who's completely got realizations, got clairvoyance, got understanding emptiness, got bodhicitta, their mind is so refined, so pure, so virtuous. There are no delusions almost left. So that purifies their wind energies, and they can, just by existing in the world, just by breathing, Geshe Lama Kontrog could simply breathe the air, which contains everything. But he is so subtle and so advanced, he lived on breathing the air. He got everything he needed for all his physical mind, all his body. Can you hear the point?
Yes.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. It isn't it?
And the next level yogis, who are pretty amazing already, can live on these pills that are made of the minerals and the flowers. And I mean, Lama Yeshe used to have one of his American students lived in retreat like this. I saw photos. He was skinny as a rake, but it gives you much energy because your mind is so strong. Mm. And even different people, different experiences. I know when I just did a 3-month retreat one time. Just 3 months. I'm not much of a meditator. I'm pretty hopeless. I hardly needed any food at all. I just lived on juiced vegetables. I needed nothing. Your mind gets very content and your body needs very little because your mind is purifying your body as well. You understand?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Didn't last though, I promise. I love my food now. Okay, you people, we've got 20 minutes to talk about emptiness. Any more questions?
No, that's okay.
Okay, good.
So now all this excitement to get to emptiness, now the whole thing ends up in emptiness. So all the way through from the beginning to the end of this path, we have been preparing our mind, controlling the body and speech, controlling the mind, adding compassion to the mix, purifying the mind, purifying, making it more subtle, more powerful, more virtuous, more amazing. And now we combine all the first 4 perfections of benefiting others. Within our meditation, we then perfect the last 2. So then we get concentration, and now we use that brilliant, focused microscope of the mind in the second mode of meditation to get to see, finally, that there never has been, isn't, and never could be the fantasy, intrinsic, inherent, existing from its own side, real, solid, definite me that we've believed since beginningless time does exist. But we discover that it has never, could never, and doesn't exist. That's the first moment we get the insight into the truth of the ultimate way that the I and indeed everything else exists. So the king of logics to prove emptiness, as Lama Yeshe paraphrases Tsongkhapa, who's quoting Buddha, is dependent arising. So the best way to think about how things exist ultimately is to first see it in the framework of how they exist conventionally. So the world consists of trillions of phenomena, things, objects of knowledge, these different synonyms. Well, things isn't literally there, but objects of knowledge, things that exist, trillions. And why this is crucial to understand these different synonyms for that which exists is because Buddha wants us to cognize that which exists, which means once you've removed the lies from the mind, then you can see that which exists. And finally, so we've got the grosser delusions we've been trying to harness in the earlier stages of practice, like attachment and anger and low self-esteem and arrogance, all this other rubbish that make up their own stories that we project onto me and other things. We've begun to calm those down in the middle scope. Now we've added bodhicitta to the mix, and now we can get to the subtlest, most pervasive, the wickedest lie of all, which imposes, that projects onto me and everything else this wrong, this mistaken way of existing. So in other words, when you see the cake through the lens of attachment is a branch delusion of the root delusion. So it's called ignorance, so it's ignorance, the root delusion, the subtlest delusion, the most pervasive lie in the mind. So attachment, and they work together. Attachment, all the delusions over-exaggerate. As Lama Zopa says, all the delusions decorate on top of what is there, layers upon layers upon layers of characteristics that just aren't there. This is a really simple concept when we get it. It's like a colorblind, you know. So your being colorblind causes you to decorate pink onto a black thermos. You decorate on top of what is there, black thermos, something that isn't there, called pink. Well, you know, there is a cake on the plate. So even at the level here, when we've got attachment, which is a branch delusion, with the attachment glasses on, you see that cake on the plate through the lens of your attachment, which causes the cake to look totally more divine than it really is. That's attachment's job. It's a liar. But we can't see the difference between our rose-colored spectacles and the cake. We can't see that we're projecting a lie onto the cake. You know, the person you don't like at work because they kind of sniff the wrong time, or they're rude, or they're arrogant, and you have anger towards them. So you're seeing that person through the lens of your anger, and you can't see that you can't see the difference between the person sitting in the chair next to you and the anger that you're projecting onto them. We'd assume it's that person. But so that the root lie, which attachment and anger are branches of, that root lie called ignorance, what that exaggerates, the attachment exaggerates deliciousness, aversion exaggerates ugliness, depression exaggerates I'm ugly, whatever, all these delusions have their own lie, their own exaggeration, their own embellishment. So the root delusion, which informs all these branch delusions and which is working at the same time, causes the cake. It exaggerates the very ontological status itself of delicious cake, ugly boyfriend, beautiful this, ugly me. It's underneath everything. It's informing everything else. So it's the subtlest, most pervasive lie. And of course, the hardest to eradicate for this reason, you know. So the way to look into how, so let's use the phenomenon called I, this person here. So we see ourselves through these same lenses. One day you think you're the ant's pants, you think you're lovely, and you've got attachment in your mind, you think you, and then you over-exaggerate your importance, you've got all this pride and sort of, you know, like this. Next minute, the pride collapses, and then you think you're the worst creep on the planet, and now you're seeing yourself through the lenses of a depression. We've got all these lies on our mind all the time, and I is one of our most popular subjects. I is one of the most popular words in our mind, isn't it? It's the main word, it's the main player in our head. I, me, my. That's how we are, you know. So we want to look into how does the I exist conventionally? That's the discussion we have to do in order to trigger the insight into how it doesn't exist in the way we think it does. So we're trying to establish how it does exist conventionally, which triggers the insight into how it doesn't exist. And why do we want to look at how something doesn't exist? This is a really funny point for us initially, but it's very logical. So in this different levels of dependent arising, the first is cause and effect. So we forget that. That was when we learned about karma. It's a very good one that prepares us for this. The next one, which is not the subtlest meaning of emptiness, but it's a really tasty one. The Buddha is saying because of this ignorance in the mind, deep in our bones, it causes us to make two mistakes, either one or the other. And we'll look at the first one first. It causes us to believe utterly and totally that there is a very special part in here. The second level dependent arising is that things exist in dependence upon their bits and pieces. Things exist in dependence upon their parts. And he's arguing with the previous Hindu views that posited that there is a part that is intrinsic, that is permanent, that doesn't change, that isn't caused, and that is called an Atman, or a self, or a soul, or an essence. Buddha's arguing with that philosophical position. He says there isn't such a part. So we've got to do analysis to find out because we believe it so strongly. And our words express that we believe there's a special piece in here, walking hand in hand, as my friend Pende says, with all the other bits and pieces. I mean, we don't analyze it like this, but that's the analysis we have to do. We really do believe if we searched among all the thousands of bits and pieces that make up Robina or Fred or whoever you are, you're going to find a finger, you're going to find a finger, an eyeball, an eyelash, a toenail. Look at the numbers of things. A ligament here, a something there, an elbow on the left side, a pinky finger on the right. You're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of bits of Robina, bits of I. And this is the analysis we have to do. We have to break down the person into their component parts. And what we're doing, and it sounds so hilarious to us, is looking very consciously for this very special part that we instinctively and totally believe does exist there, that's like the owner, the boss that runs the show. It's called I. We talk like this. I did that. I am a creep. I have a nose. So there's this type of argument. It sounds so hilarious to us. It sounds so kind of abstract. It sounds kind of meaningless because we so take for granted this lie. We have to sort of force logic in our mind to deconstruct the lie, to question freshly all these assumptions we have. So we're acting upon the assumption that there's a real, intrinsic, independent I. And Buddha says, there ain't one, honey, and you don't need one. But that's not the emptiness yet. You don't just end there. There's more to go. So we have to make a decision what to do. It's 3 minutes to go, time to go. And my voice is going as well. So my feeling is if we can fit it in, we're going to have another talk about emptiness. So you have to decide when you want that, you people. I'm sorry, because I just haven't finished and I can't continue. I've got to go somewhere as well.
And Robina, next week we have Vajrasattva and purification at the same
change
time.
it to this topic. And maybe we can come in, maybe we can end with Vajrasattva. We'll finish the whole day with Vajrasattva. It's very, very appropriate to do that after emptiness. So let's do it next week, yeah?
Okay, yeah. And the next week was originally scheduled for 1 hour. Should we make it 2 hours to include
Make it 2 hours again, yeah.
Okay,
we'll do emptiness, we'll finish emptiness, and then we'll end with the Vajrasattva practice. An explanation of the practice. And it's very appropriate because Vajrasattva is perfect for understanding emptiness. Because it's finally when we realize emptiness that we purify everything. Okay?
Yes. So everyone, please book your calendar and I'll send out email too.
And you can remind me as well. Jangchob, Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam, Ke Yuchi, Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne Gondu Baba Shog, Gewa Di, Nudu Dag Lama Sange Dugune, Drowa Chikyang Marupa, Dei Sala, Gurpa Shog. Never give up, okay? And if we're still alive next week, we can keep chatting. And if not, then have a happy mind and go to your next human rebirth and we'll meet again one day. Don't worry about it. Keep moving, babies. Thank you, precious ones, all of you. Never give up, never give up. Think big, think vast, and be optimistic. And yes, we've all got rubbish inside us. Who cares? Treat it like a grain of salt. That's applying emptiness. Goodbye. Thank you, darlings.